Welcome back, CrimePod Castle listeners. I'm so excited you could join us for another Twisted Love Deep Dive.
Twisted Love, that's right.
Crimes of Passion.
Oh, yes.
So get ready, because this
Yep.
one's going to take us on a roller coaster. We're headed to Pune, India, back in 2014.
Ooh.
Picture this, right?
Right.
You have this young, super successful couple. Everyone envies them. They seemingly have it all, and then bam, they're found brutally murdered.
In their own home, too.
Yeah, in their own home.
Yeah.
It's the kind of case that really makes you question, like, everything you thought you knew about love.
And betrayal.
Totally.
Yeah.
And the deeper we dig into this case, the more we start to see, like, these cracks in this perfect life they're portraying, you know?
Yeah, that facade. It's always so fascinating, isn't it? Like, how often that happens.
It really is. So let's start with our victims here.
Okay.
We've got Akshay Sharma and Neha Rathi.
Both 28.
Both 28 years old. And, I mean, get this. They're both brilliant software engineers.
Living the dream.
Living the dream, right?
Yeah.
It seemed like they had this charmed life.
Absolutely, yeah. They were college sweethearts, recently married.
No
The
fault.
whole 9 yards, truly.
It's almost hard to imagine something, like, so dark happening in their lives.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's what makes the events of July 14th, 2014 incredibly jarring. So let's, like, paint the scene here for our listeners, right? What did the police find when they got to Akshay and Neha's apartment?
Well, imagine this. It's like a scene ripped from a nightmare. One of the neighbors had called the police, right?
Yeah.
They said they'd heard some kind of disturbance, shouting. Sounds like a struggle was going on. So the police arrive, and they find Akshay and Neha, well, lifeless in the living room.
Oh, my God.
Both of them stabbed.
Multiple times.
Multiple times. And the apartment. It was just chaos. Furniture overturned, blood everywhere. It was a brutal scene. Clearly a violent struggle had happened.
Oh, gosh. It's just hard to imagine the terror of that night. Was there anything, like, in the police reports, anything that stood out to investigators, you know, as a clue right away?
Well, one big thing. There was no sign of forced entry.
Really?
Yeah, the doors were locked, windows were all intact. So right away, that tells investigators that the killer was someone Akshay and Neha knew.
Wow.
Someone they led into their home.
Someone they trusted.
Yeah.
Well, that really narrows things down, doesn't it?
Yep.
You'd naturally start looking at their inner circle, like friends, family, colleagues.
Exactly. And that's exactly where the police focused their investigation. They started to piece together Akshay and Neha's lives, trying to find any hidden conflicts, any resentments that could have led to this horrible act.
So they're looking at finances, any potential enemies, maybe even a secret affair, anything that could point to a motive.
Exactly. Think of it like peeling back the layers of an onion, right? On the surface, their life seemed idyllic. But as the investigation went on, a more complicated picture started to emerge. And one name kept coming up.
Okay, and what name was that?
Rajiv Mehta.
Wait, Rajiv Mehta. As in Akshay's colleague, Rajiv Mehta.
The one and the same.
The one who had a past with Neha.
Yes.
Okay, now this is where things start to feel like a tangled web. What was Rajiv's connection to the victims exactly?
Okay, so Rajiv and Akshay worked together at a pretty big IT firm in Pune.
Okay.
But here's the twist. Rajiv and Neha had actually dated back in college.
Oh, wow.
So there's a history there.
Yeah.
It's that classic love triangle situation.
Yeah.
Lingering feelings, potential jealousy.
I bet the investigators perked up when they heard that. A past relationship, possible jealousy. Those are pretty strong motives in a crime of passion, wouldn't you say?
For sure. And here's where things get even more interesting. Remember how we talked about there being no sign of forced entry?
Uh-huh.
Well, the apartment complex had CCTV cameras. And guess who was spotted entering the building on the evening of the murders?
No way. It was Rajiv.
You got it.
Wow.
The footage showed him entering the building around the time of the murders, and then he leaves about an hour later, looking visibly shaken.
Okay, so we've got a potential suspect with a prior romantic connection to Neha, and he's literally placed at the scene of the crime during the murders.
Yeah.
What happened next? Did the police bring Rajiv in for questioning?
They did. And under the mounting pressure of the evidence, Rajiv cracked.
He confessed.
He confessed to the murders.
Just like that.
Well, it wasn't quite just like that. I mean, there were hours of interrogation. They presented the evidence, the CCTV footage. It all built up this very compelling case against him. And faced with all of that, Rajiv broke down and admitted to killing Akshay and Neha.
Okay, so at this point, the investigation shifts from who to why, right?
Right.
What did Rajiv say about his motive? Like, what led him to such a desperate act?
So Rajiv claimed he went to their apartment that night to, like, clear the air. He said he wanted to talk to Neha, confess his feelings, maybe hoping for a second chance or some closure. It's really hard to say.
It almost sounds like he was living in this fantasy world.
Yeah.
Like he couldn't accept that the relationship was over,
Yeah.
that Neha had moved on and was building a life with Akshay.
Exactly. It points to a serious lack of, like, emotional maturity, and this kind of dangerous obsession with the past.
Yeah.
Rajiv had somehow convinced himself that if he could just talk to Neha, he could win her back.
Right, but how does a conversation about feelings turn into a double homicide? Something must have happened to trigger that level of violence.
Well, according to Rajiv, the conversation escalated quickly into an argument. He claimed that he never meant to hurt anyone, but as the argument got more and more intense, he said he just lost control. His emotions overwhelmed him, and he snapped.
He snapped. That seems like, I don't know, a bit of an understatement considering, like, how brutal the crime scene was. What exactly did he do?
He attacked Akshay first, just in this fit of jealous rage. Stabbed him multiple times.
Oh, my God.
And it wasn't just a single blow or anything. It was this frenzied, violent attack.
What about Neha? Did she just stand there and watch?
No, of course not. Imagine the horror she must have felt seeing her husband attacked like that in their own home.
Yeah.
According to Rajiv's confession, Neha tried to intervene, to stop the attack. But tragically, she also became a victim of his rage.
So he attacked her too?
Yes. He stabbed her multiple times, fatally wounded her. Then he fled the scene, just left behind this, like, unimaginable carnage.
It's chilling to think about the terror they must have felt in those final moments. It's just a stark reminder of how quickly jealousy and rage can become deadly.
It really is. And, this is a classic example of what we in criminology call a crime of passion,
Yeah.
It's a violent act driven by these intense emotions, often committed in the heat of the moment, without premeditation or planning.
But wait, isn't that what Rajiv's lawyers tried to argue in court?
Yeah.
Like that it was a crime of passion, not premeditated murder.
Exactly. The trial started in early 2015, and it basically became this battle between those two narratives. The prosecution argued that Rajiv's actions were premeditated, that he went to that apartment with the intention of harming Akshay and Neha.
Okay.
And they had some evidence to back that up, right? Otherwise, it would be hard to prove premeditation.
Right. What evidence did they have?
Well, they pointed to the fact that Rajiv had actually brought a knife with him to the apartment. That suggested premeditation. They also highlighted the brutality of the attack, suggesting it was much more than just a spontaneous outburst of rage.
Okay, that makes sense. So then what was the defense's argument? How did they try to paint Rajiv as less culpable, I guess?
The defense focused heavily on Rajiv's emotional state. They argued that he was deeply in love with Neha. Obsessed, even.
Okay.
That seeing her with Akshay drove him to the brink,
Yeah.
They claimed that the argument, the fight, triggered this temporary loss of control, leading to this tragic but unplanned outburst.
So they were basically saying he wasn't thinking clearly, like his emotions got the better of him.
Exactly. They were trying to present him as a man driven to the edge by his emotions, not a cold-blooded killer.
Oh, man, that must have been a tough case for the jury to decide. On the one hand, you have a brutal double homicide, and on the other, this narrative of a, heartbroken, possibly, crime of passion. How did they ultimately rule?
The jury deliberated for days, carefully weighing the evidence, the arguments, both sides. In the end, they found Rajiv Mehta guilty of the double murder of Akshay Sharma and Neha Rathi.
Wow.
He was sentenced to life in prison.
Life in prison. Wow. So it seems like they ultimately believed that his actions, even though they were fueled by intense emotions, were still a deliberate act of violence.
That's right. And the judge, when he delivered the sentence, really emphasized the devastating impact of Rajiv's actions, not just on the victims, but on their families and the community as a whole.
It's hard to imagine the ripple effect of a crime like this. What about Akshay and Neha's families? Like, how did they cope with such a sudden, senseless loss?
It's unimaginable. Both families were completely shattered by the murders. To lose their children, their loved ones, in such a horrific way, it's a pain that's hard to even comprehend, you know?
Did they ever speak publicly about the case? Did they share anything about their experience or how they were coping with their grief?
They did, and their story is so powerful. Instead of, succumbing to their grief and anger, they channeled their pain into advocacy.
Advocacy. In what way?
They became really vocal about the need for a greater awareness about the dangers of jealousy and obsession in relationships. They pushed for stricter laws to protect victims of domestic violence, and they urged people to seek help when struggling with difficult emotions.
It's amazing that they were able to find the strength to do that, to turn their personal tragedy into something positive, a force for change.
It is, and their efforts really helped to break down the stigma surrounding mental health issues, especially within the Indian community. They encouraged open dialogue about difficult emotions, emphasizing that seeking help is not a weakness, but a sign of strength and self-awareness.
It's a message we need to hear more often, especially in a culture that often prioritizes success and achievement over emotional well-being, right?
Right. Absolutely. And their story really highlights how a single event, as tragic as it was, can spark change, It can inspire others to seek help, to speak out against violence, and create a more supportive and understanding community.
So we've talked about the victims, the investigation, the trial, and the aftermath. What about the bigger picture? What can we learn from this case? What lessons can we apply to our own lives and relationships?
The Pune couple murder serves as a really potent reminder of the dark side of human emotion. It shows us how love, when twisted by obsession, possessiveness, and rage, can lead to devastating consequences.
Yeah, it's a wake-up call, a reminder that we need to be vigilant, pay attention to the red flags in our own relationships and the lives of those around us.
Exactly. We need to be more aware of those warning signs. Controlling behavior, extreme jealousy, escalating anger. Those are not signs of love. They're signs of potential danger.
And it's not just about recognizing the signs in others, right? It's also being honest with ourselves about our own emotions. Like, when does jealousy cross a line? When does anger become something more sinister?
I think it all comes down to, fostering a culture of empathy and support, We need to recognize that everyone struggles with difficult emotions sometimes.
Right.
And that asking for help isn't a weakness. It's actually a sign of strength.
Yeah, that's a really important point. It's so easy to get wrapped up in our own lives and our own struggles that we forget to check in on the people around us. Sometimes just listening without judging can make a world of difference.
Absolutely. And I think it's about challenging those societal norms that romanticize obsessive love and possessiveness.
Right.
We need to be promoting healthy relationships that are built on respect and communication, emotional maturity.
That's a big one, right? Like, we see these unhealthy relationship patterns all the time.
Oh, yeah.
In movies, TV shows, even music. It's like we're conditioned to think certain toxic behaviors are normal in relationships.
It's true. We need to be more critical of the messages we're consuming and start promoting healthier, more realistic representations of love and relationships. It's about changing the narrative, both in our personal lives and in the broader culture.
And it starts with each of us, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Taking responsibility for our own emotional well-being, recognizing those warning signs, and getting help when we need it.
It does. And as we wrap up our deep dive into this tragic case of Akshay and Neha, I want to leave you with this thought. What small act of kindness, what gesture of understanding can you make today? What choice can you make to prioritize emotional well-being to kind of help shift that narrative?
That's a really powerful question. And it's a reminder that we all have a role to play in creating a safer, more compassionate world. It's about fostering those connections, having those tough conversations, and choosing to build a world where love doesn't end in such a devastating way.
Exactly. The Pune couple murder, it's a stark reminder of the dark side of human emotion. But it also gives us an opportunity to learn, to grow, and create a future where love is celebrated. Celebrated for its beauty and its strength, not for its capacity for destruction.
So as we close our exploration of this tragic case, I want to encourage all of you listening to remember Akshay and Neha, not just as victims, but as individuals who had dreams, who had ambitions, and a love that was tragically cut short. May their story inspire us to cherish our own loved ones, prioritize emotional well-being, and work towards a world where love is truly a force for good.
And thank you for joining us on this journey. Through the complexities of love and crime, we hope this deep dive has given you some new insights, and maybe even inspired you to foster healthier relationships in your own life and in your community.
And remember, for more gripping stories of love and crime, follow and subscribe to CrimePod Castle's podcast, a YouTube channel, for more gripping stories of love and crime.